Hello and welcome to today's episode of the Effortless Swimming Podcast. My guest today is pro triathlete Will Draper. In 2019, Will sent me an email with some footage of his swimming, and I did a Feedback Friday video on YouTube where I analysed his stroke. And if you look back at that video, you'll notice that his body position's quite poor, his catch and pull's pretty average, his timing's not that great, and you wouldn't say he looks like a swimmer. Fast forward to today. If you look at video of Will swimming, you would think it's a completely different person. He sent me an email recently where he included some recent footage, and it is night and day. And if you go to our YouTube channel, and we'll include this in the show notes as well, you can see that comparison from 2019 to today, and you can see exactly how Will is swimming now. Back in 2021, Will qualified as a pro triathlete, and in 2022, he had several top 20 placings in the PTO ranked events, and for 2023 he actually had 4 top 10 results. So he's become a very good triathlete coming from a non-swimming background. So on this episode I wanted to ask Will what he's done to get to that point, coming from a non-swimming background to becoming a pro triathlete, and now he's only 75 to 90 seconds off that front pack with those lead swimmers. So he's swimming very, very strongly. So we ask what he did, what he focused on, and what was his mindset, and what sort of things did he learn from the elite athletes that he was training with, like the Brownlee brothers and several other high-level triathletes and swimmers, and what he learned from them. So let's get stuck into today's podcast episode with Will Draper. Can you describe your initial feelings towards swimming and how they've evolved over time?
Yeah, so I knew how to swim, and my mum was a swim instructor for kids, so I was very lucky that I had parents that would take me into the pool, because I think that's part of it. And I was also lucky that my auntie lived where there was a bit of surfing down in the south of England in Cornwall. So I had done some surfing where you kind of get battered by the open water. But my first 750 was over 15 minutes, so it was slower than 2 minute per 100 pace. So I never had any speed. And actually, I remember I did that race when I used to just cycle, and I went down to a swimming pool to check if I could actually complete 750 meters without having to stop, basically. And I did it in a pool just about. And yeah, now it's just completely changed. It's just like almost every day in the pool, and dedicated so much time over the years to it. It's crazy when you look back on it, but it's been worth it, I will say.
Was there a key moment for you that made you decide to pursue triathlon seriously and turn pro?
Yeah, my brother and I both used to cycle, and he actually reached a higher level than I ever did. He was 7th at the Junior World Championships, and I think nowadays that would secure you a ride on the World Tour. But 4, 5, 6 years ago when he did it, it wasn't the case. They didn't really take on young riders. But he actually went to the Gold Coast Commonwealth Games, and I was on the long list for cycling, but I didn't get selected. So my mum and dad and brother were down in Gold Coast, and I was at home, and I wasn't really enjoying cycling so much, and I kind of wanted some new goals, and just decided to take up triathlon, and pretty soon thought I actually want to do this quite seriously, because I was already trying to turn professional in cycling.
And do you feel like, so you obviously had a very strong cycling background. What was it for the running? Did you get that up to speed pretty quickly and quicker than you did with the swimming?
Yeah, so a lot of people, I do have a background in cycling, and I would say that I have a strong background in cycling, but I only cycled until I was 17, and at that age, a lot of your races are like circuit racing, which is really beneficial to short course and the tactics of short course racing. But just with not having a strong enough swim to compete in short course, I had to go into long course, where the background I had of circuit racing wasn't exactly perfect for 90k 70.3 races. So I felt like I knew what I wanted to do, and knew I had to improve my swim and my run. But it's actually more recently I've realized how high the standard of cycling is now in triathlon, and I don't actually feel any better off than some of the riders out there. But I did used to run a little bit, where I'd represent kind of my school at cross country, but it's not like anything you'd see in America or anything like that. It's literally just because no one else would do it. They'd be like, "You're pretty fit and healthy, go for a run." And yeah, the running came a lot more naturally than the swimming.
Can you take me through your training regime and how you approached your swimming to be able to improve the way that you have over the last couple of years?
Yeah, so initially I trained with the Alaman squad, which is a squad that's over here. It's from anyone from sort of 10, 11, 12 years old up to the older guys are a couple of years older than me, like 24, 25. So I'm 23. Um, and I enjoyed that, and I got a lot faster at swimming, but I only got faster. I didn't really get stronger because they were so anaerobic sprint based that I couldn't get what I needed out of those sets. It took me a few years to realize, and I actually benefited then from leaving that squad, training more on my own, because they would do something like 950s off 3 minutes, and the guy who leads that squad just went 48 high in the UK champs or England champs or something. So they're super fast, but it wasn't the right stuff. So it was actually, I see my biggest improvement in my training when I stopped swimming with the squad and actually swam on my own. And then more recently, the past 12 months, I've been lucky enough to join a full-time squad in Leeds with Alistair and Johnny Brownlee and Beth Potter in their training squad, which has made a difference. But the past 8 weeks, I've been swimming on my own again, and I think that it's not the be all and end all to be in a squad, because when you do swim on your own, you can tailor everything specifically to you, what you need to do.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I find a combination of both is really good for myself, where I tend to push a lot harder with the squad. I'll commit to doing a longer distance in the squad because I'm not going to get out early. But then doing some sessions on my own, I can be very specific with what I'm doing, and I can typically work on faster or shorter cycles as well, because because you can just do what you need to do. So I think both can be great, and I'd say there's no excuse to not do well if you don't have a squad, or if you can only get to a squad. You know, you have people who are successful in the sport who do either, and you just got to use whatever you can to your advantage when it comes to that.
Yeah, I'd agree. I think there's pros and cons to both. My biggest asset when I swim on my own is I actually use a tempo trainer, but not for turnover. I use it as like a divide 100 into 4, and then have it so that it's on each turn. So if I want to swim a threshold pace of 116 in training, I'll have it so it beeps every 19 seconds. And if I can get a lane to myself in quiet public hours, I can get into flow so much easier than a busy squad session, say. But then on the other hand, you sometimes really fade in a session, and when you see someone next to you swimming slightly faster, that is really helpful. So I think, as you say, there's pros and cons to both, but I just think if anyone's listening and they only have one option of the two, that it is possible to still see really good improvement without having both.
Yeah, and I think some kind of accountability, or even just something outside of yourself to give you that motivation, and whether that's a tempo trainer beeping every 19 seconds, or you're looking up at the stop clock on the wall, or I like using the form goggles for a lot of my sessions where I can see the pace. Like just having something there to keep you somewhat accountable and keep you on pace, and rather than just wandering aimlessly through the session. I find even just something very small can help.
Yeah, that's the key thing. And I think a thing that I used to do that I don't do anymore is just chasing sessions too hard and trying to be better than your best swim of the past week or the best swim of the past month. And sometimes you just have to be really consistent. And I've had months and months where I've got no better, and then towards the end of it, I'm actually getting worse. And it wasn't a case of throwing in the towel or changing how I was doing things. I was confident that I was doing things the right way, and then suddenly I could have a down week and come back in the pool and just have dropped 1 second off all my paces. So I think sometimes you just gotta be confident in kind of your structure and yourself, and know that it will eventually kind of show improvement. It might just not happen straight away like other sports.
The amount of times that people have said to me, like I was practicing something and it felt like nothing was happening, and maybe I got a little bit slower, but then like one session or 1 week it just clicked for me, and I saw that in the compound of that work that I'd done it had finally paid off. It just happens so regularly, and I think people just give up too soon with that quite often. And I spoke about this on a podcast recently. It was the concept of infinite games versus finite games, which is a concept I heard the author Simon Sinek talk about. And a finite game is like it, where there's clearly defined rules and an endpoint, and there's winners. And that might be like let's say a triathlon that you're training for. Like that's a finite game. But I think if you think of your swimming as an infinite game, where the aim isn't to to win at swimming, it's just to keep swimming and have that longevity in it. I think that you can approach things in a way where you're just happy, working at things, and just that continue the frequency, and just being able to stick with things and kind of happy working away. And I think the payoff then happens after several weeks and several months. So not trying to rush things or force things. So I've tried to take that approach to swimming and to other things. It's like, what can I continue to do forever? And I've found that to be really helpful, especially with like gym work and swimming, where I don't need to just smash a session and smash myself. It's just, no, if I can just be consistent with things, then I'll probably be better off long term.
Yeah, exactly. The reward comes from the struggle, and everyone wants this goal to achieve and reach. But the problem is, if you get there, then you work better if there's a goal that you'll never achieve, because you just keep working towards it. But I think with triathlon especially, I like to think about how fast swimmers are, like full distance swimmers. If you look at them Irish lads, the brothers in the 1500, I think one just got the world record or European record. And I think of a level of that as an end goal being unachievable. And then when you look at triathlon swimming, you actually think, well, it must be quite achievable, because there's a lot of people that do actually swim front pack or do swim up the front. And from that aspect, it actually makes triathlon seem a little bit more approachable, if you think how unapproachable professional swimming is.
Yeah, absolutely. Was there any barriers that you had to overcome mentally when it came to swimming, whether it was in the open water, whether it was feeling like you could mix it with those better swimmers? Was there anything that arose over the last couple of years for you?
Probably when I started working with my coach. He still kind of mentors me now, but unfortunately I can't actually afford to pay him when I was living in Leeds, so he's very good to me. But he's a guy called Mark Buckingham, and I got a sponsorship off a wetsuit company called Yonder, and the co-founder Angus told me that the other co-founder Mark was an ex-runner, and at 24 he turned to triathlon, and he had to swim a 400 meter TT, I think, in under 5 minutes 20 in order to get on British Triathlon's development program at the time, which I don't think they do that anymore. You need to be quite a bit faster than that. But I remember thinking, oh, well, that's good that it's achievable, and didn't think much of it. Then I actually raced Mark in a race that was held in the UK just in lockdown, and I came out at the back on my own, kind of with two other guys. Then there was a main pack of kind of strong bikers and guys that aren't so good at swimming, like Joe Skipper was in that main pack. Then there was a front pack of, I think, maybe Reece Barkley, Josh Lewis, guys that actually have led out the front of internationals or up there. And Mark Buckingham was on the back of the front pack. So not only was he he was a non-swimmer, he then was suddenly coming out with his front pack. So I was like, who is this guy? I need to talk to him. And then Angus got me in touch, and then he was helping Johnny Brownlee into Tokyo. And after that, he was going to coach more athletes. And he came on board as a coach. And what he did for me was he helped me with zones, which I never really stuck to. I was always a sucker for chasing best average in a lot of swims. And he really helped me just be like, nah, stick to the zone. It should be achievable on a bad day, and it should be achievable on a good day. It's not unrealistic. And another thing he helped me with was just how important getting on feet was. I know that when I was in age group, it was a little bit harder because the race was more dynamic and people set off fast and people don't set off fast enough, and it's a bit more all over the place. But when you're in a pro race, you have to go fast at the start and you have to get on feet, because that the race is going to go away from you and there's not going to be a second chance. And he just drilled into me how important getting onto feet was and establishing that kind of part of open water swimming, which I just thought, oh, it's beneficial, but never thought much more of it. And when I started to do that, I actually started to sense the fact that I was in the mix in races, and obviously you need the strength on top of it, but it was a bit of a thing that just a kind of moment that you look back at and you think you're silly to have not thought how important it was, but now it does make a world of difference physically and mentally.
I've got two questions there. So tell me more about the what you changed in terms of the zones, apart from going best average as fast as you can hold for the whole set. And then what did you do to train being able to get on feet?
So I used to do a lot of mixed sets, which is very classic. And where you'd go in and you'd do a warm up and then you do some fast stuff and some threshold stuff and a cool down. And you kind of do that each time because you felt like you were getting a good mix of improving everywhere. And then when I trained with Mark, and he basically trains the same way that Alistair and Johnny do. So when I trained with him for a year before I went and joined that squad in Leeds, I went there and it was pretty much identical to what I had been doing. But I'd have, say, 5 zones. And the way that my training works now, and it works on that squad, which they're open about, is that Monday is strength aerobic, so just building strength. Tuesday's VO2, which would be regarded as your fastest pace, but unlike what I was doing, which was just out and out as fast as I could, VO2 is, in their eyes, is a little bit more like a controlled speed, like a realistic speed compared to what you'd race. Another thing I used to do with my VO2 was, I think that 50s, it might be a controversial topic, but I think 50s are easy to misguide yourself into how fast you actually are, because I feel like even if you're unfit or if you're not very fast, you can get away with having a fast session if it's just built up of 50s. So that's 50 meters that I'm talking about. So we started to do more 75s, 100s, even up to 150 on the speed work, just to give you that more realistic idea. And then Wednesday would be long aerobic wet reps or in open water in summer. Thursday would be threshold, and Friday would be kind of your drills and your mix. And I think the big part for me was I always was slow in the warm up, and I saved everything from the main sets. And I had I knew what my threshold was. I sat for so many months. I literally think I sat for about 10 months on a 120 threshold off a 135 off time. And I was just kept asking Mark to change it, take me off it. I was doing 2100s every week, every Thursday. And occasionally he'd give me 6 150s, 4 100s, 2 times through. And he didn't change me off it. And it was just the fact that I had these zones, which were these set speeds. And as I mentioned before, I could hit them on a good day, but I wouldn't push past them because I'd know that a bad day would be due. And on those bad days, I could just about squeeze onto them. And I think that was a big game changer in my swimming, was just going into the pool and being like, right, I'm going to go this pace today or that pace today. And it is achievable. And it's not like, oh, last week I kind of went 1 or 2 seconds faster. Maybe I can do it again this week, because it's just not a sustainable way to think, because there is going to be days you're going to get into the pool and feel terrible.
And was there a particular race or moment in your triathlon career where your improved swimming ability made a big difference on the overall outcome?
There was a particular race. I'll start off with telling you a particular race where my poor swimming ability was highlighted. It was when I first started triathlon, and I'd done it for about 8 months or something over a winter and into a season. You had to do a qualifier for the British Series, and it was a 800 meter time trial on a Saturday, and then on a Sunday you were set off in the order you would have came out the water for a bike and a run, just because it was cold and the time of year, etc. And this was to qualify you for a series. I remember the cutoff for the 800 was 11:40, which I think was around 128 per 100. So I just focused on that for months and months and months. I did the swim. I was second to last in this swim. I don't know how I even beat someone. I think I swam about 11:30, but these are all super fast kids, like 9 minutes at the front. And there was about 150 people. And anyway, I passed loads of them on the bike and run because I was so outweighed strength there. And I ended up qualifying for this British Super Series, and in about 35th, and there were 40 in it. So I qualified, and my first race was WTS Leeds, and it was the kind of junior version of that, and it was a super sprint. And I remember saying to my mum and dad, like, look, the people that I'm stood next to on the start line, on average, they're about 40th in the swim, and I was like, I was 150th in that swim. So I think I'm going to get like some time put into me here. And they were like, oh, it's only 400 meters. And I remember I lost so much time that the crossing points had opened when I was coming. I don't know if anyone has race leads, but when you come up out of the water up to transition, the crossing points had actually opened because they thought that all the swimmers were done. I had probably, in a space of 400 meters, I probably lost about 45 seconds to a minute off the back of all these fast kids. And it kind of hit me then how important swimming was. And that was my kind of moment that I thought, like, I need to get better at swimming, and it's not going to happen quick because I've just spent 8 months and I'm still getting absolutely blown out the water here. And that was kind of when I realized this is going to be a long project over the next 10 years. But I think more recently this year, I've actually been able to make decisions in a race.
Yeah, it's great to hear you say that, because I see it as when you get to that level or that point in your swimming where you can almost be a third person to your swimming, where you're able to make these judgments and, all right, do I need to go over to this pack? Do I need to go a little bit harder? Do I need to overtake? When you can kind of just sit back and analyze and make decisions, that's kind of that's that next level and that next step with your swimming, compared to just going out and it's just survival. There's one pace and you just want to get through it. So, and there's no shortcuts to that. It comes from race experience. It comes from having the fitness and the strength to be able to adjust your pace and know what you can sustain throughout a race. But I think when people get to that point, that's when their swimming really becomes a lot more enjoyable, because you're not just a victim to your circumstances. And then you can get such better results, obviously, because you can be a lot smarter about the things that you're doing inside in a race. So it's and that takes time. How long do you feel like it took you to get to that point?
I remember in that squad where I trained with the sprinters to start with, I was so out my depth, I couldn't even flip turn on a wall, and these were guys that were swimming 50 seconds for 100, but they were so nice to me, and they were lazy with their distance sets, so I kind of could get away with slotting in between. But I remember speaking to one of them asking, like, first of all, I couldn't flip turn without it being so overwhelming that it was all I thought about for the whole length. And I remember saying to him, I still remember now the feeling of being like, is this ever natural? And I teach or help some of my friends now swim. And I explained to them that I was at that point where I thought it's never natural and it never comes. I remember one of them said it was about 3 years of consistent swimming. So I say it probably took 5 years, because it took me 2 years to them first 2 years in 2018, 2019, you're just learning about yourself and being able to swim and what it means and stuff. And then it took 3 good years. And I would say at that point, I feel like now I would describe it as if I go into a public swimming session and I stand out. I don't just look like a public swimmer. Someone will say to me, are you a professional swimmer? And I'll say, no, I'm not. I wish I was as good as that, but I do professional triathlon and I do spend a lot of time in the water. But for a long time, I could go into public swimming, and some guy on his lunch break would probably put me away in some 100.
I've had a couple of athletes that I coach tell me that, like, they've been at the pool and someone's made a comment like, "Wow, you've got a great stroke," or you look like a professional swimmer. And and their confidence, and like, they're just beaming after that. Mm-hmm. And it's such a nice compliment to get from someone at the pool. So the fact that you've put in the work to get there is awesome, because it's you go to the pool and those swimmers do stand out, and I think their confidence and their comfort, even just walking into the pool, that stands out as well. So it's
the trunks get smaller. That's what I've noticed.
Yeah, it's very
You
true.
start with the jammers, and the full length ones that go down to the end of your quad. Then you go for the half length. Then you go for the like box shaped ones, and then when you're real confident, you go for the budgie smugglers.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And sometimes it even starts with the board shorts as well. If
Yeah,
you're brand
yeah,
new to it,
yeah.
um, and if you are wearing board shorts, you're making it really hard on yourself. Just at least get some jammers so you're not creating a heap of
Yeah,
drag through the water.
I literally have started using drag shorts. Do you know the ones that are like mesh on my over the
Yeah,
top of
yeah.
my short, just for my Tuesday sessions because I feel like I can sprint really fast, but I actually want to be a bit stronger. I actually think that they don't make that much difference at all. And I thought if I really wanted to make a difference, I'd just stick a pair of like, as you say, board shorts on, and I bet they'll feel lethal, like trying to get up to speed off the walls with them on, with the pockets full of water. Yeah,
Um,
I went the other way recently and did a 750, a 1500, and a 100. And one of the guys lent me. He's been to the Commonwealth Games. So they had the Commonwealth shorts that they were given from Speedo or whatever. You could probably buy them, but it was the first time I had them, and I thought getting like a cycling skin suit on was hard. And these must have been like, I don't know what they were, but they were so small, and I must have spent 15 minutes in the changing room trying to get them on. And yeah, I felt like Leah Thomas when I had actually managed to finally get them on. And I think I shaved a second off per 100 just from the compression around the legs.
Yeah, and that's just the shorts. Like we used to wear the full bodysuits, and that would be a half-hour mission to get the bodysuit on, and that was almost your race done because it was that hard to get the race suits on. But they were so much faster. I remember the first time I wore it, I dived in, and I felt like after I popped up, like I felt like I popped up out of the water because of the amount of like just you feel like you get buoyancy from it, but you don't really. But it's just that less friction, and it was amazing. Just felt completely different. What advice would you give to non-swimmers who might be intimidated by the swimming aspect of triathlon?
I have a friend actually who has just started swimming, and this is a guy that he's a close friend of mine. We used to cycle, and he cycled at a good level, to be fair to him, at a kind of national UK level. And he's decided to get into triathlon, which is great for me. I've got several friends now that have got into it, and one of my friends did an Ironman where I couldn't finish recently, and it's great to see. And he couldn't swim a length without, he keeps getting water up his nose. So it's been a bit of a kind of thing with him to try and help him. And I was down in him in the pool, and we were we were in a shallow pool, and we were walking along the bottom of the pool. I did it with him because I didn't want him to feel embarrassed in any way, and we were doing the kind of arm turnover, but while walking, and breathing out your nose, and just getting used to that. And I think like people expect that you are just going to go to a pool and be able to do something quite well, and that if you don't, everyone's going to judge you there. But I think if you're a complete non-swimmer, just try and find a shallow pool, which I mean one that you can stand up in, and that'll help your confidence. And he couldn't do more than, when I first went down with him, he couldn't do more than 10 meters, but he was brave enough to stay consistent with it because it's not easy. And especially if you've done sport at a high level elsewhere, it's almost embarrassing. But he now is telling me he's doing he did his first 100 the other day. And I think it won't be more than another couple of weeks before he'll start getting into like reps where he'll go and do repeats of hundreds or whatever. So I think if you're new to it, you just have to really embrace the fact you're going to have to take yourself out your comfort zone and start, because you have to start somewhere, and it's probably not going to look pretty, but I can guarantee everyone who's in that pool, they're not embarrassed, or they're not the kind of judging you. They're just thinking like, I remember when I was like that, because even myself, I remember just that first sort of intro to swimming. It's not natural, so don't expect it to be.
Yeah, you can't get better at it. Well, you can't start swimming by reading a book about it. Like you just need to get in the water, and you just have to be willing to suck at it for a long time. And as you said, get out of your comfort zone. And I do see people at the pool who are new because they're stopping after 25, or they're having to stand up, and it's like, I think like good on you. Like it can be a very intimidating thing to start swimming as an adult.
The only other piece of advice I have that I learned which is it's from as soon as you start up to at my level at professional, is just this. Alistair Brownlee is big on this. It's just the time on the wall is just you just shouldn't spend much time on the wall, and it's a mistake I've made in the past, and I see it with my friends, and I look at their Garmin data, and their elapsed time is like half an hour longer than their whole swim. Might be 45 minutes to swim and half an hour elapsed time. But if you think about running or anything like that, if you're trying to do a half Ironman or a full Ironman or even a sprint distance where you're trying to swim consistently for a decent period of time, the races are 15, half an hour, over an hour long. And people just get in this habit. I see them and I think you need to swim to get better at swimming, and your warm-up should be nice and easy. That it's pretty much touch and go now for me on a warm-up. I might do 400 swim, 300 pull, 200 paddles, 100 kick, but I don't need to recover between them reps. I'm just warming up. So I'll literally stop and then put the pull buoy in and go again. And I think that is something that has made a big difference for me. Alistair instilled it in me just because that's the way the squad worked. And now I do it myself. And I tell my mates, I'm like, you ain't going to get any better stood on the wall. Do your warm up, take a bit of a reset mentally, do your prep, have a minute, have a drink, then do your main set. But just don't stand on the wall. It's at the end of the day, it's swimming. It's a bad habit to get into stopping, because if you did it while running, you'd feel like a wally, really, if you just kept stopping every 200 meters and standing at the side of the road for 10 seconds, 20 seconds.
Yeah. It's a good point, especially for triathletes who are training for 3 sports and time limited. So just spend that time at the pool, primarily swimming. And I guess the caveat there is depends on what you're training for. You look at the sprinters that you mentioned at the start, they're doing 6 or 850s or 650s off 3 minutes. So there's a lot of time on the wall. So it just depends on what you're training for and what the purpose of the session is. But if you're doing distance swimming,
the majority of people,
as an Ironman or half Ironman athlete, it's going to you can kill a lot of time just by mucking around on the wall. So I think that's a great point.
As I say, the way the sessions work, as I was talking earlier, is the VO2, the speed session, would be about 30 seconds rest. I feel like unless you're an anaerobic athlete, you're not going to benefit from any more than that. And then threshold, like 10 seconds rest. I do threshold now, 3K sets with around 7 to 12 seconds rest between reps, and it feels like nothing, but that is threshold if you're doing it right. It shouldn't be. If you're needing more than, well, this is the way I train, because I know that different athletes are different, but if I need more than 15 seconds to recover, I'm swimming too hard.
That makes a lot of sense. And for you, so when you got in touch the other day, your target was, so you're about, I think, 60 to 90 seconds off the front pack in your races. What are your future triathlon goals over the next couple of years? What are you having in your sights?
So I feel like I'm kind of only just still on the rise, and everyone has their own story, and you see all these athletes breaking out, and it's cool to see. And the sport, when I swapped to the sport, I feel like the level I'm at now and the training I do, back then it would have had me up there as one of the kind of best 70.3 guys on the scene, but obviously it's grown. That was 5 years ago. It's grown now. I think that the benefit of swimming is exponential. In age group racing, it was good, and it was maybe, I don't want anyone to think that swimming is not important, but I think in pro racing it's so different because these bike trains go and you've just got to be on them. Like, I train with other athletes. I know what Alistair holds at the front. I know what athletes in the group in front of me hold, and I know what watts I have to hold. And if I take that 60 to 90 seconds off, which if you're getting on them fast feet, that's not actually 60 to 90 seconds. That's only maybe 45 seconds faster. And the other 45 is just the second half of the race, where occasionally I've led my group the second half of the race, and I want to be kind of near my limit on the feet, which would be perfect, really. But I think that my PCO bike ranking went up, and I biked less watts than normal most races. And it's just because that first 20 minutes I'm in a group and I might bridge across to another one, and I can actually race it more dynamically. So for me, my long-term goals are to be top sort of, I'm ranked 160th, I think, in the minute. So if I say next year, ranked 100th, the year after that 50th, and then by 2026 top 15. And I think the way I'm going to get that is from swimming well, biking easy, being a strong biker and biking easy and running fast off the bike, because I have actually ran a 110 high half off the bike, but it was off of a bike that I crashed on, and I actually rode it in at like 270 watts, whereas I'd normally ride at say 300 or 310. So I know that if I have an easy bike, I can run fast and even work on that even more in the future. So I think that's my avenue to success, really.
Will's before video, which we did a Feedback Friday on in 2019, I believe, and then the comparison one to today. So go to the YouTube channel and check that out, and give Will a follow as well on social media. What's your where's the best place to find you?
Instagram, Will_try, nice and straight to the point.